Today's video is brought to you in part by Ridiculous Top 10s. Do you like ridiculous things? Do you like supporting YouTube channels? Do you have 90 seconds to spare? If you answered yes to any of these questions, check out youtube.com/at Ridiculous Top 10s. Good afternoon, everybody. It's another Fad Friday. Today we're going to take a look at the Fire Hero Ember Sanguine, our resident favorite vampire gal, if you will. So Ember is a gold hero, and she's a fire hero. She was, and I might still be, the first and only fire healer that we had in the game. I remember when she first came out, it was a big deal because we did not have any fire healers. At the end of the day, she was kind of a mixed bag between DPS and heals. We're going to break that down a little bit today and see where she falls, how she compares to other healers. My example today will be compared to Nub Nub. I'm not going to go into too in depth with multiple comparisons, but I just have a couple things that I want to point out here about her. We're not going to do too much in-depth comparison. She's quite a bit substantially low level compared to other heroes that I have. We will be looking at her ratio of various stats to her level. Her level, being where the actual stats are housed. Those are static. So let's start with what she is first here. Obviously, she's arcane. That doesn't really mean anything. And then she's a healer, so she has naturally high skill for the most part. First off, we'll go through her traits. Buff supply and extra turn. It's always great when buffs last longer, particularly if she ends up with something like shields or invulnerability, things like that. Those can go a long way, as sometimes an extra turn makes all the difference, especially in PvP. In PvE, you'll see that come up eventually when you get to the really, really hard dungeons where you want that buff to last just ever so slightly more, especially if you're looking at things like Inspired or Regeneration that are going to heal you. Her second trait is Fiery, has a 50% chance to apply 1 stack of burn to targets on a basic attack. That's one of her trademark skills, if you will, or traits. This is important because the burn mechanic plays an additional role in her other traits. So it's important that when she attacks, she does able to burn individuals. That's her main thing as a fire hero. A lot of her stuff does inflict burn, if you will. Middle trait, much like other heroes we have, increase the skill by 10% for all fire allies. Again, she is her own fire ally, so she gets that. That 10% is actually a bit of a rounding error, if you ask me. If you look at her skill, at least for me, her proficiency is 11%. So it got that extra 1% somewhere, rounded up somewhere, but that's just what it is. So I've looked high and low to try and figure out how the calculations take place with some of these things here. Haven't quite narrowed it down yet, but like I said, there's a lot of rounding errors, or not errors, but a lot of rounding in this game that we just flat out don't see. Everything's rounded to the nearest whole number. Her fourth trait, Cloak and Fire. Fire allies gain immunity to burn. Not really that big of a deal. There's not a lot of burning that's happening in PvP, for example. Might happen a bit in PvE, but ultimately PvE you control things quite a bit better than if you did PvP. But the more important thing about this here is she's able to cleanse a debuff on herself at the beginning of her turn. So this is great if you run into something where maybe the opponent has Jhin, but is not part of a Rayla team. I know that sounds very unlikely, but random things happen. With her being fast, generally speaking, she's going to. Actually, I'm sorry, she's not fast anymore. She used to be fast. Um, but she would end up purging that silence when her turn starts, allowing her to use her abilities. So a nifty little thing to have there. It's always nice when you can get rid of debuffs, especially for free. And lastly, her marquee trait, if you will. Whenever a stack of burn is applied, all allies gain 3% max health. That is herself included. So that 50% stack of burned is important because it's a chance to raise max health. I know it's only 3%, but basically a raising of 3% also acts as sort of a pseudo heal as well because it raises the total amount of health that you have based on what you had, and so you would have more. So overall, as far as traits go, she's got some neat mechanics. You pair her with probably one fire hero at least, then she starts to pay dividends for sure. I can't really advocate for an all fire team. It's just not going to work out in PvP. When you get to really hard dungeons, though, especially when we get into boss mode, and you have to run some of the dungeons with an all fire team, running her along with Torchy and Spitfire and one other fire hero could end up for some neat synergies. So I'm looking forward to those days when they come out. Let's take a peek at her actual stats then. So, stats for attack and defense. Um, in this case here, attack, defense, and health don't really matter for her too much at this point here because she's a healer. Really, the only thing that really truly matters is skill, unlike other heroes that we've reviewed. Those other traits just don't work out so well. So as far as attack goes, she's in the currently attack to level ratio. She's in the bottom third. Defense, she's in the bottom third, if not the bottom quarter. Max health, she's right about 50-50 for me, so she's right about in the middle. So she has decent amount of health, especially for her lower level. And comparative to her level and for what she is. You know, she's not a damage dealer, and truthfully, she's not much of a healer either. We will look at that a little bit more closely. Um, her skill is pretty significant currently. As far as what I have, her skill to level ratio is off the charts compared to anybody else, with the exception of Nub Nub. And that's just because my Nub Nub is 6-starred and quite a high level as well. So that value is going up and up. Um, but I'm going to compare to Nub Nub today because Nub Nub is a bronze hero and Ember is a gold hero. There's 2 degrees of separation there. So realistically, we're expecting a gold hero to be able to do some stuff. We're expecting them to be better, right? Nub Nub, in my opinion, is a top tier healer, if you ask me. And maybe I'm just biased because I used to run goblins all the time. He's obviously not as strong as the old goblin team used to be, but Nub Nub is my go-to healer. He is just solid all around, even if he is just a bronze healer or bronze hero, if you will. Ember, on the other hand, though, is gold, and we'd like to know where the gold actually comes to play. And so let's take a look at her other abilities then and talk about these a little bit. Um, she does have a basic attack like everybody else has. Nothing special here. 509 in this case here. It's even Steven 50% of her attack rating. So all things considered, that's actually better than anybody I've reviewed so far. So her attack compared to her level is actually very good, and maybe that's where the gold comes in, is that she doesn't have to just heal, and we'll see that with her other abilities too. She doesn't have to just heal, she can do some damage as well. All of this stuff at the cost of her health and her defense, so keeping her alive is generally going to end up being both a top priority as well as a liability, because you might do whatever you can to protect her and still not be able to, and so that's the risk you take when using Ember. Her first ability, her starting ability, Fireman. So it is a ranged magic attack. Not really anything special about that. It is magic. And it does 778. And it applies 3 stacks of burned on hit. So as long as it hits, which it will because it's a ranged magic, it's not going to be dodged. So at first glance here, 1, the stack of burn is going to proc her other trait, raise. health by 3%. So you get a freebie there. And then as this one rounds out, heals allies for 20% or 25% of the damage dealt. That is essentially negligible. So if this thing, it says it's going to do 778, but that's before any damage reduction takes effect. So we're talking essentially pennies on the dollar in terms of what the heal is. All things considered, this first ability is a damage dealing ability. It is not a healing ability. Because even if you did full damage and did 700, let's call it 800, 25% of that is 200. We just saw that Ember herself at 42 has 4,000 health. What good is 200? It's nothing. So this is a damage dealing ability at its heart. When we get to her second ability, Cauterize, that's when we get our real choice with her. So we have the ability to target an ally, and one removes all debuffs, great, and it heals them for 2258. That 2258 um, is, let me check my cheat sheet here. 2258 is going to end up being, sorry, bear with me for a second here. 2258 is approximately 1.3 times her skill rating. So, comparatively speaking, I don't think I have Nubnub's numbers. I don't. The only other healing value that I have for that is Augustus. Augustus's Aegis Wall heal does um, 2.93, does almost 3 times skill rating. That said, Augustus is a tank and not a healer, so he doesn't have a ton of skill as it is. But if we look at this a little bit more closely, so one, removing debuffs is a big thing, and ultimately healing them for 2,000, that's pretty decent. When we look at looking at this as an attack, the attack is 1-to-1 with attack rating and that basic attack. So that 509 was the same as her basic attack. So it's essentially the same as doing a regular attack in that the only other thing it does is it purges all the buffs. Because it's such a low attack and she's not a strong hero, the proc to destroy enemy corpses, it is likely not going to hit. Certainly not in PvP. I don't expect Ember to be doing too much of the killing, to be honest. One of the neat things about her, in order to try and trigger that corpse removal, is the fact that she ignores taunt. So if you weren't quite able to finish somebody else off, ignoring the taunt might be a way to get that corpse out of the battlefield and kill that ally. Again, you're going to be using her against, let's say, a Niveus team to deal with corpses. She's going to get rocked pretty hard right from the start because Niveus is a water hero. Consider who's going to end up getting paired with her. You get the likes of Igorok or even Grognog. Any number of people, and she's going to be in a rough spot to start with without some other type of help like a invulnerability from Zen, for example. Now you're dealing with a team that's got 2 healers on it. It's a slippery slope there. Um, so far we've gotten the first ability, basically no heals at all. The second one, a good size heal, but compared to Nubnub's single target heal, remember Nubnub is bronze. So Ember's single target heal does 2258 at level 42. I don't know exactly how that scales yet because I haven't looked at it, but if we look at Nubnub, for example, Nubnub's single target heal, energizing heal, does a whopping 10,600 at level 60. So reasonable amount of levels higher than what Ember is, but we're talking 10,000 here compared to 2,000 over the course of 18 levels. Um, that's a lot, I think. I don't know if Ember's going to get up into the 10,000 range. Being gold, I kind of hope she would, but her actual heal is not really her marquee heal, or her big target heal is not easy to come by. Um, and that's probably what ultimately separates her into a gold hero, is her third ability is the perpetual flame. So the heal itself is the same value as before, that 2258, same as with Cauterize. So those are the same values. However, it's 2258 for each person, and it's also per turn for 3 turns. So this is the total heal of this one here. If we have a full team of 4, for example, we're looking at, each turn is going to be almost 10,000, and then for 3 turns, you know, so let's call it 9,000. 9,000 for 3 turns. Um, that's 27,000 total heals. On top of that, this is a resurrect skill. So the counterpart to actually getting that heal is somebody has to be dead first. So while it's a massive heal and 3 turns of essentially regeneration, um, when are we going to get to use it? Someone else has to die before she dies, and then you can use it. The great thing about this also is that it is a multi-target heal, multi-target resurrect, provided that they're fire allies. I don't know about you, but I don't expect that I'm going to have a bunch of fire allies that we're going to do this. I would be doing this for the heal, but again, if you can't heal somebody, or if you can't resurrect them, what are you going to do, right? I have not looked at this to see if she can not resurrect and just heal in general. That's easy enough to test. All we have to do is go into a dungeon to do that. So I'll show that right now. We'll just pick a dungeon, and I'll tell you if she can heal. Get through some basic attacks here. If you saw that there, that was a burn stack, and it gave plus 3%. Um, Starts powered. Guess what? Can't use it. No valid targets. Why? Because it requires resurrection. And that's kind of a bummer. Being that we could pick and choose with her second ability, it would have been great if we could pick and choose damage on this one too. Maybe do some damage and then ultimately, um, get some heals off of that. So at the end of the day, like I said, her marquee heal that does the biggest actual heals comes with a huge cost, and that somebody has to be dead first, and that's just terribly unfortunate. So when we get into boss mode level dungeons and people actually are dying, Ember might prove to be an absolutely invaluable hero. If we look at her cooldowns, for example, um, I guess we gotta wait for her turn. That's the other thing we have to look at with healers. Cooldown of 5 for that big heal. That's quite a bit, unless you have some energy proc. And even on her first one, so I mean, her single target heal is only 3 turns, so that's actually pretty decent. Um, but all things considered, like I said, Ember is going to be uh, a major liability when it comes to survival. I don't see many instances where she's going to be able to survive in PvP against a elite defense. If you put her against some nature heroes, sure, I think she'd do all right. You bring in folks like Spitfire, for example, who starts taunting. You have the ability to at least get one of her attacks off, but she's also not fast anymore, so you got to let all of your fast heroes go first and all of their fast heroes go first. No matter what you do, I think she's going to end up being a liability because of her health and defense. She's just going to take a lot of damage. So unless you can protect her properly with that forced taunting, for example, by Spitfire, or protection from Zen, but even consider those two: protection from Zen and taunt from Spitfire. Who else can you even put on your team? Your team is soaked up with a mediocre healer, another mediocre healer, and one of the worst tanks in the game. That's not a team that I want to use specifically. So, um, in the event that she gets a rework or maybe an epic, she might turn into something a little bit better. But all things considered, when we look at her compared to Nub Nub and Yasmin, And even really any of the healers, she's not living up to being a gold caliber hero, and that's really terribly unfortunate. It's possible that as I progress, the amount that she gains um, might live up to Nub Nub, for example. We could get a quick glimpse of the scaling if we will. The one thing that I can't predict right now is how much the skill is going to impact the heals. I just don't have that kind of data yet until I get further into my research. Um, but for example, we'll look at if we leveled up her ability or her character one time. So if we look at her single target heal, for example, it's 2258 right now. Um, let's level her up one time. Okay, so without leveling up the ability, just by getting extra skill, um, we went from 2258 to 2299, so it goes up about 40. And then each increment is less than 40. Each increment is about 30, not even, it's about 25. It's exactly 25. So I got plus 40 for the level, and then I get plus 25 for the um, actual ability itself. So plus 65 per level. Um, tell you what, that's not getting very high. Plus 65, that's less than 100. So let's even if we call it 100, that's going to be 1,000 at 53 and 2,000 at 63. That puts a single target heal of 4,000 roughly. Not exactly anything superstar. When you get to her 6 star ballpark, maybe that goes up to about 7 or 8,000, maybe. Still less than Nub Nub. I don't think it's going to clear 10,000 though. So, um, that said, yeah, I'm done with her story. I'm done with everything there. Without an epic and something to raise her base stats, I fear that she's going to be one of those ones that just doesn't get any attention, and that's unfortunate because, like I said, I think she's the only fire healer out there, and there's supposed to be a lot of potential. But in the earliest of the game, each of the individual elements had kind of their own thing. Fire was always meant to be damage dealer. That's why there never was a healer. So, and it's also why we see so many yellow healers. The light healers. That was just kind of what they did. Um, so with that said, I wanted to be more excited about Ember. I hope that you know making her normal kind of sucked. I think that took the wind out of her sails. It removed her attack penalty and made her stronger. Um, but at the same time, she's very underwhelming. She should, in my opinion, end up being a bronze hero. But that's my opinion. If you have any nifty Ember tricks, there's not much you can do with her aside from gain health with the burn. But if you have any tricks, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, that's all for this Fad Friday. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you for watching, and remember, I make YouTube videos for the American working man, because that's what I am, and that's who I care about.